The Powers Project.
Christos, how are you today, sir?
Doing very well, Kurt. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm glad to have you on the show because I've heard about your book from Lisa David Olson, which is called "Wild Dogs and An Adventure in Adolescence." And I thought, oh, that's quite the title, especially
Yeah,
with the wild dogs in the front. So I was like, oh, let's find out about what his adolescence was like. And
sure.
why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the book?
So I was born in Canada, and for my high school years, I went to a private boarding school in Saskatchewan. Excuse me, bit of an allergy cough today, so bear with me.
Okay.
I um I went there from grades 9, 10, 11, and 12 with some mishaps along the way. The school that I went to was a predominant hockey boarding school. There were other sports there as well, but hockey was, I think, the main highlight around of going there. Now, I not only didn't play competitive hockey, I could barely skate. So it was a bit of a challenge to convince for my parents to convince me that this would be the place for me to go. And I did go, best years of my life, learned a lot of life skills that didn't just evolve around sporting, but was also an element of such. But the lessons that the institution that I went to taught me, I didn't really get or implement until years after I had graduated. So I tell the story of my journey from 9 all the way up to the end of grade 11, and they'll know why when they read it.
Okay. So do you have siblings?
I do. I have an older brother and an older sister. They're both in Fort McMurray, Alberta. We have a chain of gas stations and some other properties, rentals, things like that we operate in, and they're up there full force. Yeah.
So, all right. So when you were sent off to this boarding school and your parents convinced you to go, did your siblings also go to boarding school?
No, I was the only one in my family. I think that they would have. It's just that my family found out about it when I was going into my grade 9 year. I had a close family friend from home who was moving to another city, and I guess our parents talked about, maybe not wanting to split us up, etc. And we ended up both going. So he moved to another city, but we ended up going to the same private school.
Oh, okay. So was this? I'm kind of trying to find out. Is this something that you wanted, like, or did they just go, "All right, son,
No,
you're
I
going
actually,
there."
I actually almost didn't go in my grade 9 year. I don't know where you went to high school, Kurt, but the I was somebody that for sure needed more attention than most. Like I always struggled in school, and why this private school had seemed so attractive was because for every 3 students, there was 1 administrator.
Hmm.
Now, when I went to like a charter school, we maybe had a class of like 8 or 10 people, but the structure at this boarding school, and I would assume a lot of others like it, you just got a little more attention. And I needed it. Even with the extra attention and extra help from administrators, I did not do well in high school, as people will read about. However, the lessons that I learned there, I carry with me now
Right.
to this
Well,
day. So
well, I went to public school, but I was kind of putting myself into your mind when you were that age, and thinking, how would I feel about that? And I can't help but think that at that age, being uprooted from your family and like taken away from the family that you've known, the life that you've always known, and be uprooted from that, and then just taken out and plopped into a whole new lifestyle. I mean, was that scary for you? Was it lonely? Was it exciting? I mean, how did you feel
there
about
was
that?
there were certainly battles of how I felt missing home, etc. And then kind of identifying what exactly was I missing, that there wasn't really anything going on there for me to begin with. I had my friends, but I was making new friends. And
Right.
even the friends I had growing up, I still have now. But then I have all these other friends. So you start to see those benefits after the fact. One thing I remember, Kurt, that always stuck out when we were younger, we weren't allowed sleepovers. Like it was just like my mom's thing. She's like, I don't like, no, we're not doing sleepovers. So now I go from no sleepovers to living with 40 guys I don't know. And it was like, whoa, this whole time you told me we can't do this, and now we're like, what the fuck is going on here? Like things like that I had thought about ended up being a great decision. I mean, I cried when I had to go there, and I cried when I left. So it just shows you the impact that it makes on your life, as I'm sure with anyone, and it's not just a boarding school, it's anybody in their high school years. I hear people sometimes, they say, oh, high school wasn't a good experience for me. And that really sucks. And I witnessed it all. I got, minorly bullied or what have you, or made friends, got made fun of other people, like playfully. And it was a good experience for me. And it built up my character, which I hope to think is a good one.
Well, okay, so you make a good point, because you'd said for some people, high school was a very difficult time.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where apparently you understand the lessons that were learned in high school and how they've helped you out into your adult life. I agree with you, because we try to protect our children so much now that they're not allowed to face anything by themselves. And so we have these children who are growing up without understanding what it is to overcome things, because their parents are always there overcoming them for them. And so they never have any sort of personal growth, like you said, like minor bullying or something. Kids, I'm not suggesting that, or advocating for bullying, but we all went through it. At some point, you were the little kid and there was a bigger kid, and you learned how to deal with it. And it wasn't always running into mommy and letting mommy take care of it.
This is kind of we could say this about life.
Right. Exactly.
There's always going to be a bigger company, or someone making more money than you, or another person making less money than you. And we all have our own problems. We could say simpler times. I grew up just getting into the generation of cell phones. Nobody had cell phones. Well, I mean, I had a couple when I was, running what I was doing that I got expelled for. But it's different now, and people form opinions based on their experience. I don't know what kind of an experience a lot of these kids are going to have if they're being coddled and sheltered from real life experience. Real life isn't pretty a lot of times. Life is beautiful, but there's a lot of pain in life.
Right.
People have to experience pain to appreciate everything else.
Right. Exactly. And
I don't have kids myself. My brother we just had our first nephew in the family, he's 4 months old, but I can imagine what my brother is going through, because my brother grew up in a rougher circumstance than most. He went to there was 3 high schools in my hometown. I would say he went to the rougher of the 3. But I don't think if I were to talk to him, he learned a lot of life lessons. He had a lot of great teachers, as did I, but my brother was also drastically more competent than me when it came to curriculum. His grades were good. If they weren't good, it was because he just didn't care. But in my opinion, was far smarter than me, school smart.
Right.
I had, they said, you have ADHD, you have all these things, and I couldn't focus. I was trying to. And when I went away to private school, my grades were not good, but they were drastically better than if I would have stayed at home. So in my situation, to go back to what we were talking about, I needed the extra, I don't want to call it coddling, but the extra attention,
right,
and protection, because I don't know if I would have stayed home, how that would have turned out.
Well, all right. So let me say this real quick, and then I want to make a point. So I think that what we see from all this coddling that we've been talking about, is that you do have people like who work for Spotify or who work for Netflix who've been coddled, and they start whining because the company decides to make decisions that they don't like, and they start throwing little temper tantrums as though it's their company or something. And I think that's what we see, is a bunch of little babies who throw a temper tantrum when they don't get their way, and they try to force people to do what they want them to do. And it's unfortunate, because it's
we're seeing it. I think we're seeing it across all platforms. What is
right.
Nothing's forever, right? And these things eat themselves. So eventually the people pointing the finger at things that they're not liking, they're getting the finger pointed back at themselves.
Right.
And everybody's just, we have to be aware of people's feelings within reason. What is so beautiful with streaming services, it's like the one thing I've said has gotten better is TV. There's so many options. And that's just the thing, there's options. If you're watching something and you don't like it, then don't watch it. But then watch something else.
Exactly.
And what is the problem? This is a place for everybody. I don't like a lot of the things people say, but they're entitled to say it. I remember very young, my social studies teacher told me that free speech is sticking up for somebody else that says something you don't agree with. Exactly. And I still believe that today. There's a lot of people I don't agree with, but they have the right to say what they're saying. They're not threatening anybody. They have views that you don't agree with.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And I don't understand why these, especially this past generation, this youngest generation and the one before that, why they have such a hard time with understanding that the world is not all about you and your feelings and what you want. It doesn't revolve around you like your mommy told you. And yet that's how these kids grow up becoming adults, thinking the world still revolves around them. And I want to just go grow up and quit acting like
a child. These things will have to happen naturally, whether it's on a global scale or domestically. Freedom isn't free.
Right.
And exactly. This is, why besides, this isn't like when you had, I don't want to get too far down a rabbit hole of like global conflict. But our, grandparents were dealing with Spanish flu, maybe, depending on the year, dealing with a world war,
a depression,
dealing with shortage of food. So if this generation now has not experienced anything that separates indefinitely their needs and their wants, you're not going to have the correction.
Right.
The correction will inevitably come because history repeats itself. This is what's just mind-blowing is we think that, oh, that couldn't happen now. Well, we just saw a European country get invaded and this is right now. It's a European country. This is right now. This is not the 40s, the 30s. This is right now. So anyone that thinks that this or that can't happen is blind to the realities that anything can happen. And they're just going to be unprepared.
Right. And you're right. They are going to be unprepared. And I know we could go down this rabbit hole, but I want to keep things a little lighter.
For sure.
So let's go back to your take on high school. Even though, you just said what you said about it, you also said that high school is harder than real life.
Absolutely.
So
I think in high school, look, if let's say you're in a work meeting, a boardroom meeting, and if you had a coworker bullying you that other people saw, that individual is going to get spoken to, or they're going to get terminated. It's unacceptable. In high school, kids don't know any better. They're just finding their way. So they might say or do things that they think is funny for them, but it's not funny for somebody else. And I didn't see anything when I went to high school that would warrant something that I would remember, like, oh man, that was like, besides like, we used to get like, you're stealing pizzas and things like that, just fucking around as kids. But if you imagine now, if you just, something as simple as what we were just talking about, let's say you stole a coworker's lunch and then laughed about it. No, that's not how that's going to go. There's going to be a consequence for what you've done. You steal somebody's pizza, now what are they going to tell you? Like, listen, like, stop fucking around. And that's pretty much it. So obviously a very light example, but high school is harder because you're just finding your way. Everyone's finding their way. They're finding out who they are, their character, who they want to be, how they want to be maybe remembered or treated. When you get into the workforce, when you're done high school, there are so many committees and boards that are policing all of this stuff. There's two educations in high school, one that's in the classroom and one that's in the dorm for private school. And you found your way in both and you didn't have a choice. It was,
You had to learn.
yeah, and sometimes learn the hard way.
Right. Yeah. Well,
I was a mouthy kid, and any discipline that I got was deserved.
well, you also said that, you you talk about accepting the fact that you're always going to take the hard way because that's how you learn. And I think that's important because I think there's a lot of people like I can relate where sometimes I don't say I always took the hard way, but a lot of times I did because that's how I learned because I'm a little, thick-headed sometimes. And so it takes a little bit more to get through to me than it would the average person. And
For
so
sure.
I relate to that. And I think it's important that people understand how they learn. And I know that you were diagnosed at an early age with ADHD. So how did that work in with your whole concept of I'm going to have to take the hard way because this is the only way I seem to learn anything?
I never liked school. I never cared to pay attention. I thought I was smarter than most of my teachers and still do. And that's not right. But the concept of somebody older than me telling me how something's going to be, the thing that goes into my head is, what the fuck do you know? I had very good teachers in private school, very good, that weren't there because they needed it to be. They could have got jobs doing quite well financially. They were there because they wanted to be. And there was respect there. And maybe it didn't help my very bad with math always. It didn't help my studies, but I respected them. We had like a first name basis there. So you didn't call a teacher Mr. Whatever, you called them by their first name. And it puts you on an even playing field. And I really liked that.
So these teachers that you had that you respected that could have done other things but chose to teach because that's what they loved doing.
For sure.
Did you feel like you were smarter than those teachers as well?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think I was smarter than any. I don't feel I was smarter than any at the time. Maybe I acted a little like a smart ass, but
Right.
in looking now, like my elementary teachers, yes. Elementary, junior high, I still don't think that any of them were superior or smarter than me. No.
Okay. So, all right. Well, let's talk about a few things here. One is that you went to this boarding school, you were expelled, and as far as you know, you're the only student that was able to return from being expelled and graduate from this school. Is that correct?
Yeah, it isn't something that's documented, but I keep in touch with the president of the school now. His name is Rob Paul Marine. And he said that we don't have record of this, but we would likely assume that this is the case. So yes.
Yeah, I don't think that across any schools across this country, I don't think that happens often, where
No.
someone gets expelled and then invited back in and graduates from that
Yeah.
school.
I'm very fortunate for them to do that and to give me that opportunity to come back and, call it redeem yourself or what have you. But I learned a valuable life lesson when that had happened, because I had sacrificed so much for money, and what I lost was everything that I actually cared about.
So, do you want to talk about what it was that got you expelled?
So when I went there in grade 9, I think that was the first time I ever had a beer. And I'm pretty sure I was drunk off of one beer, or I was feeling something I had never felt before.
Right.
And you're young and you don't know. And it's just, alcohol is just this majestic thing. You'd never, when I was younger, we, would find cases of beer in the woods and stuff and hide them. And just, it was such a foreign thing. So when I went into grade 10, a little bit older now, you're in the big boy dorm. There were kids that were getting alcohol. They were like, we could go around and be like, okay, what kind of pizza do you want? Okay, medium pineapple and ham. And you could take a pizza order. Okay. And then Domino's would bring out the pizzas and you charge like $10. Each pizza was $8 at the time. So the kid that was doing the run would get $2. They were doing the same thing with booze. So you had your above ground operation, which was the pizza and wings and whatever. And then you had the underground operations, which was, for me, was alcohol. And then there was also like chewing tobacco. So I made a deal with these older kids. They were in grade 12. I was in grade 10. I thought they were just like the coolest guys on the planet. Like, this is so badass that if I got them a certain amount of orders, they would give me like a flask, or we call them like boot Mickeys, for free. So they loved me because I was getting them all these orders, and I loved them because I was getting free alcohol. And for every weekend up until January, I think, every Friday and Saturday I was drinking. And I was like 16. And I had a drinking problem at 16. Like, I'm not afraid to admit that. But it was excessive. It was bad. And I hit it, and it was weird because I had a group of friends that I was really close with, but they were playing hockey. They were in sports. They had things to lose. They didn't drink with me until like later on in the book that I talk about. So anyways, why I got expelled, my grade 11 year, I go back. Prior to going back in grade 11, I was working in a restaurant with my brother that my family owned. And I was telling him how much these kids pay for this and we just started, like, over the whole course of the summer, or however long I was working with him, we just started like brainstorming. We're like, man, like, cut out we were young guys, but I would assume, and still to this day, quite street smart. And he was about a year and a half older than me. And we're like, we had this master plan. So he started sending me alcohol in water bottles. That was vodka or white rum. So I was easily able to smuggle it into the dorm because it looked like water. And sometimes I would sell it in front of teachers because it looked like water. And we were making a high profit. I'm sure he was watering it down, but we were making a high profit, and there was a steady flow.
Right.
Till it got out of control. Our sales went from this to this quite quickly. And it only lasted, I think, 60 days until it went south.
Till they caught you?
I never got caught. I actually told on myself because there was another kid that, I don't want to give too much away, but if people read it, I never got caught. Okay.
So, all right. So I know you don't want to give too much away, but were you feeling guilty? Is that why you turned yourself in?
Yeah. Of course. It started to become too much. It's that good and bad angel.
Right.
And it was, I had gotten warned by somebody that was very dear to me when I went there, that I talk about. And he basically stormed in my room, and they couldn't catch me. We had these things called locker searches, right? So they would come in and they would search people's lockers. Usually get, maybe under suspicion, you might get 1 or 2 locker searches a year. I was getting locker searched every week, maybe 2 times a week. It was substantial. I was living in a 4-man room with another guy, and we were like, he was helping me out big time. And it became, you got to understand, like, oh, this kid's selling alcohol through the mail. Like, it's not that big of a deal. For anybody listening, look up Wilcox, Saskatchewan, and you can see how small the campus is. And I told you the ratio with students to teachers. And for me to get away with it for even 2 weeks, it was incredible. Anyone will tell you. It was 2 months that it had gone on. So we had this, individual who was like a teacher mentor, basically come in the room and like, whatever he could, they didn't have evidence of what we were doing, but too many kids were talking. Whatever you're doing, stop. And when he left, we like laughed about it, but inside I didn't laugh. I took it very seriously, and it was too late. So I had gotten another kid who was like, I was a runner for these guys in my grade 10 year. I had a guy who was running for me like that in my grade 11 year. And I just gave him like instructions on do it like this and we'll be fine. I was trying to get rid of it. And he didn't listen to what I said. And in the end, what happened happened. And I do want people to purchase the book because I don't take profits for the book, which is another really important talking point. Even though I went to a private boarding school and it costed a lot of money, it is a registered charity. The institution is not for profit. So I never felt it was appropriate to take a profit for this when all these memories, all these stories are a group of people, guys and girls, that made my book. I might have been the one that has written it, but it's certainly not my book. It's the institution's book.
So do the funds go towards the school, or do you have a charity that
there's a foundation called the Mandy Schwartz Foundation. Mandy was a year younger than me every year up until I graduated. I talk about in my book about just doing things the hard way, not valuing my time. Mandy was the complete opposite. She's certainly not somebody that I was friends with, but there's only like 300 kids there, so everybody knew each other. So essentially, Mandy did everything properly. Got good grades, went on to Yale University and played hockey there. And 2 years in was feeling fatigued, and they thought she had like anemia. And then they did some tests and they found out that she had leukemia. So when I was seeing it on the news, it really struck me, like a lot of people that I know that went there, because here's somebody that does everything right, the right way. And you start to ask, why would something like that happen to someone like this? And I'm over here wasting my time perfectly healthy. So it definitely had flipped a switch for me. And that was, Mandy unfortunately lost her battle with leukemia. But in the efforts to help her find a bone marrow match, which is what's talked about, I believe, on the first page of my memoir, is that people can swab their cheek and get into a database and you could potentially save someone's life. And although Mandy wasn't saved, I think it's over 100 people now, just through her efforts alone, are alive today, because they did it in her name type thing. So I'm certainly not an expert on leukemia in one match, and hockey gives blood, but I really entice people and really want them to look into this, because that's what's ultimately the most important here, is for people to get involved. Well, and you can a lot of Kurt, not to go through too far down, but a lot of charities and foundations, and there's a lot of great ones out there. They'll ask you for money. We're not asking for money. You can get this kit sent to you. You swab your cheek, you put it back in, you go in a database. Maybe you never get a call, but if you do, you can literally save someone's life, which is like, I don't know of a greater accomplishment someone could have.
Right. I agree. Yeah. Whenever you can, that's just like donating blood and being an organ donor. It's, if you can help somebody else out, why wouldn't you do that? So that's a very admirable charity to donate to. So, and I'm glad that you made the audience aware of how easy it is to find out if you're a match for somebody. So that's great. Let's go back just for a second and talk about a few things that you went through in your experience at this school, besides the fact that you're running alcohol through there. Which, the funny thing is, I find that sometimes kids who have the hardest times in school or don't enjoy school is because they are smarter than the average kid, and that they see life a little differently. Because I was much like you. I was an average student. I could, because I didn't apply myself the way I could have. I only applied myself in classes that I really enjoyed and loved.
Yeah.
And the rest of them, I attended. That's the best I could say, is I attended the classes just so I could pass. But it's because I saw things differently, which you saw things differently. I used to take Little Debbie's, which is a little snack cake thing. And I used to take them to school. Now the whole box would cost you like 50 cents. Mm-hmm. And I would sell each one of them for like $1. Yeah. So there's 6 of them in there. So I'm making $5.50 a box, which back in the 70s was I mean, for a kid in high school, making
Kurt,
five.
that's good profit now.
Right. Exactly. And
Little
so,
Debbie's, I think, are only $2 a box. Even if you're, you're still making $4.
right. And so here's the thing. So I'm selling them, and I only bring a couple boxes because I don't want to get caught. But I'll be damned if I didn't get caught still, because somebody was eating one in class and said, "Where'd you get that?" And of course they're like, "Oh, Kurt gave it to me." It's like, so they turned.
You weren't allowed to sell them.
No, you're not allowed to sell them in school, and I'm like, why can't I sell them in school? But they didn't have a good reason. They just told me I couldn't. And so it's that sort of thing where you have a mindset of an entrepreneur.
I don't feel and we've I think it's a lot better now, but I don't think that we as adults should suppress someone's desire for entrepreneurship or business oriented ventures. One thing my brother said to me, and I'll bring this up, is he said, every time I see a lemonade stand, I stop and I buy all the lemonade that they have. He doesn't need the lemonade, but you're encouraging a younger mind to be like, to get a feel for, maybe money's not the best system. It's the only system that we have. This is the monetary system. So encouraging kids to get out there and, you'll make it, but put the time in for them to, and this has changed with time, but for them to tell you, leave your fucking cakes at home, Kurt, like that's bullshit.
I agree.
And not if they would have had a reason and said, hey, you can't sell these because we have a contract with a vendor that supplies, but if they didn't even tell you that, well then.
Yeah, because they didn't. And that's the thing. It's like, you're absolutely right. But see, school it's not set up to teach people to become entrepreneurs. The school is set up to teach you how to become a worker. That's what you're supposed to get a job. They don't teach you about how to become, somebody who can create jobs. You're just supposed to be part of the workforce. And that's what we see the school system set up as. And so when you have people like you or me or other people who I've known who were in high school, I mean, I remember being in elementary school. And I also remember that we were so poor back then that we had these little meal tickets that we would be given because my family was too poor. So I would give the woman the ticket, and she would give me my meal. Well, whenever I would miss school, those tickets just added up. And so I would go and I would sell these tickets to these kids who thought it was cool to have a ticket to hand somebody. So I could get face value for that ticket.
Yeah. You were a hustler, Kurt.
It just, like that's how I thought. And, just like that's how you thought, so, and I just think even when I was in the Army, I realized there are these fat guys who when we go to the PX, they weren't allowed to buy candy or any of that stuff, because the sergeant would look in their bags and make sure they didn't buy any of that stuff. So at night, I'm up there and I have a candy bar and I'm selling.
Of course, supply and demand.
That's it. And they're bidding on it, $5 for a candy bar, because they wanted that candy bar so bad.
Yeah. Well, and it's always, there's so much value in things that people can't have.
Right, exactly.
And I mean, if I would have gotten chocolate bars and chips and things like that, I probably would have been able to make a decent living. But the alcohol was such a forbidden fruit.
Right.
When you are in the middle of nowhere, first of all, illegal. I was a minor.
Right.
And damaging, because these kids are there to possibly make it to the National Hockey League, or to a Division I scholarship. And here I am, just here, ram it down your throat. It's like, this isn't, so I was like a cancer then. So, and when they expelled me, it was warranted. I've gone back and served on the board for the school now. And I told a board of people, some of which who actually expelled me, I say, when you guys kicked me out of here, it was absolutely the right thing to do.
See, I think that's such, that's such a rare thing nowadays, where people accept responsibility and go, hey, I was a dick. I deserved everything.
For sure.
And people just don't do that anymore. They just, they want to blame everyone and everything else for their situation and never think that they were at fault ever. It's like you
don't learn that way, Kurt.
What's that?
You don't learn that way.
No, you don't. And
I think when you accept things and the way that things are is when you grow.
Right. Exactly.
Whether it's personal relationships or maybe a friend that you got into it with, or a situation like me getting expelled, is if you're going to sit there and point the finger at everybody else, well, you're not. It's not going to make it. It's not going to make a difference. It's not put the responsibility on yourself,
Right.
and you'll grow.
Yeah, exactly. But you have to be self-aware to do that. And so many people lack that nowadays. All right. What I want to do, I want to talk about now is a couple stories. Because again, I don't want to give away the whole book, but there was two stories that I wanted to talk about. One was where you got caught with a dirty magazine.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us?
Haven't we all, Kurt?
we have all gotten caught, and I wish I would have pulled the trick that you pulled.
Yeah. There's desperate times call for desperate measures, I guess.
So what was it that you did when you got, and how did you get caught?
There was like, we call them house leaders. So they're kind of like kids, typically a little bit older than you, that are like working the floor. So they're kind of, before you go to an actual house parent, which is like your mom on duty, you would go to a house leader, and they're, hey, if you're doing something mischievous, they would report back. It's just kind of like a filtration system. And he found it on my in my drawer on my bed or something. And he's like, oh, what do we have here? Like, and a lot of times you could bribe these guys, like, hey, I got some beef jerky or some noodles that my mom sent in a care package. I'll give you this, but let me off the hook here. This particular time, I just had a quick think on my feet, and he kind of was like wrestling up my arms. And he got me like up, like I was like up against the wall, and I was like, what do I like, you know? And I just, because I was a very rambunctious kid and manipulative, I just like whacked my head on the back wall and just like went limp. So then I'm already in this situation, and there were ample times for me to be like, oh, okay, you know, he's okay. But I was just like, nope. And just kept going like further down that valley till an ambulance came, and all 100% true. So that's pretty much the gist of that. And I got off. I came back to my dorm after, you know, my medical assessment in the city. And I think there was like a mint on my pillow. I was just like, oh yeah, like this couldn't have went any better, right? Not thinking about the individual that he was like, oh my, he thought he killed me. Like, I didn't care about his feelings. I was like, whatever. I didn't get busted.
Right.
And I don't think I think I kept it up for that whole year. I just kept telling people like, yeah, it actually happened. Like what a lie to tell, you know?
So what do you think, the school just didn't want to, like, they were afraid of getting sued that something happened to you because
No, I was laying on the ground like I was unconscious.
Right. So
like
the school had to have known that the ambulance was called for you.
They called the ambulance, yeah.
Okay.
The people on the floor.
So do you think that it was that they didn't punish you because they were afraid that, you know?
Well, no one was thinking about the dirty magazine. Now they're thinking about, is this kid okay? So anyone, it just left their mind.
Right.
It wasn't even in the equation anymore. There's priorities. It's like, oh, we're gonna bust this kid with a booby magazine, or we're gonna make sure that this kid's okay.
Right.
He doesn't have a concussion or worse. And I don't know if I was just a good actor or they weren't very smart, but I mean, I look back at what I did, foaming at the mouth and this and that. I mean, they must have known that it just, but you know, the one thing about the institution that I went to, and I would like to think that any institution, that you have to take anything seriously, whether it's severe or not. There's no room to take a chance and say, oh, well, he's faking. Because what if I wasn't?
Right, exactly.
Believe me, Kurt, I was.
Yeah, I still think that, because of, I think if I was an administrator and I knew that, you know, I'd be like, well, what caused this whole thing? And if the kid said, well, he had a dirty magazine, and, you know, and so I tussled with him and his head hit the wall and blah, you know, I would think at some point that if if I wasn't looking out for the school, that I would have addressed it later on after you were better and said, okay, now let's get back to what caused this whole thing here, young man. But I think they were probably too worried about getting sued, that, because of what, you having to be taken by ambulance, that even though you were faking it, they had no clue. I think they were probably, as they call CYA, to make sure that you didn't come back on them because what this kid did to you.
I don't, you say that, Kurt, but I don't really remember a lot of that kind of stuff when I went to school there.
Yeah.
Like kids threatening to sue. That wasn't really in my years there.
Right. That's true too. Yeah. That wasn't something.
So I was, this was 2001.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of hard knocks back then. And I don't have any, no matter what I talk about in my book, so people are clear, and I think I've made it quite clear. I have no ill will towards anybody that I went to school with, any administrator, nobody, because it all made me a better person. Any experience that I went through, good or bad in the eyes of the reader, that's just
right.
As apparent as I can make it.
And I think again, entrepreneurs seem to have this mindset as well, is that there's a win in every situation. So like good or bad, you can find a win there. Like if you learn from it, and that seems to be what you've done, and you embrace that instead of going, oh, well, I'm traumatized and victimized, because of something that someone did to me in high school or junior high school or what my parents did. You don't tend to, you're not taking that position. Your position is, good or bad, I learned from it. And in most cases, I also deserved it. And I think that's a rare thing to find, people doing today, accepting the fact that they should bear responsibility for a lot of what happens to them.
I think it's a good part of healing and learning. And I think it's really unfortunate when you see people still to this day that are just so resentful of the experiences in their past. I don't know, maybe I'm fortunate to how I've dealt with it. And I find that putting things on yourself puts you in control of dealing with them, and puts you in control of maybe not fixing them, but working through them. Because some problems are not fixable. Like if you lose the loved one,
right,
you're not going to get that loved one back, but you can identify, well, what's making me feel this way? I don't want to, it's unfortunate you have family members that maybe they say some pretty terrible things to one another before one of them leaves this earth. And you can't go back in time and fix that, but you can be cognizant and aware of the next family member you're about to get into, a conflict with.
Right.
And I was younger with my brother and my sister and my parents, just, yelling, it was always the route I went, or just storming off. Well, now it's limiting your time. If a conversation or a situation is going in a way that you don't think is going to be positive, just limit your time.
Right.
No one's got to come to your head. Just walk away.
That's funny because that's exactly what I do nowadays. And again, like with you, my family, they were always yelling. And when I moved out on my own, I was like, I don't want any part of this yelling stuff. It's just because it's never productive. It never has been, never will be. And so, but in my family, if you don't give them the attention, like that yelling meant you cared. And if you don't yell back, now they think you don't care. I go, no, that's not the case whatsoever. It's just I've chosen to grow emotionally and have some emotional maturity and realize that we don't have to continue behaving this way as adults. So
yeah, you learn from those experiences. And I have don't really have any regrets throughout my life from probably when I started to go to school until I graduated. And I try not to think like regrets, but since I didn't pay that much attention in school, when the things with the book have been set and where I want them to be, I do want to go back to school. And I'd like to study maybe law or something to do with the human body. I'm not saying I'm going to practice these things, but I do want to learn about them.
Right.
And I think that it's so unfortunate we have people that say like, oh, I got to go to school because I want to be a lawyer. Well, you don't have to be a lawyer.
Right.
You can learn about law. You don't have to be an attorney. And I think, first of all, you need money to do that. You need time to do that. You need to have some other things established, which I'm very blessed and fortunate that I do. But I don't want to, I've never been someone that's like, oh, I'm doing well. I got this money. I want to buy a Lamborghini or I want to buy a Ferrari. Like, I love taking courses. I love learning. I love getting out of my comfort zone education wise. And I think that I have such a thirst for that now is because I pissed it away my whole life.
Yeah. You know, I have to agree with you because again, I have to say there's a lot of similarities between you and I in our lives. And I did the same thing. I felt like when I was in high school, I pissed away my education because because I didn't like being forced to do something, to learn something that I didn't want to learn or be told what to read. I didn't read until I got out of high school because then I could start reading what I wanted to read instead of, you know, the Scarlet Letter or something that I had no interest in. And not that there's anything wrong with those books. I just personally didn't find them interesting and didn't want to read them. And I wanted to read what I wanted to read. And when I started doing that, I started I became a voracious reader, you know, and even like nowadays, I have an interest in neuroscience, and so I study it to the degree that I have time and energy to study it. I'm never going to become a neuroscientist, but like you said, you know, you can study law or whatever interests you may have and learn about these things and not have to become a lawyer or a doctor or any of those things, and yet still grow and have a thirst for that knowledge. And I think maybe the same thing. I have that because I did what you did. You know, I didn't take advantage of it when I was younger.
Never read when I was younger. Couldn't, I mean, I think when I completed writing my book, I think I had only read 4 books. And writing it and publishing it, from the time I finished writing it to get it to publish, took many years. I always have a book on the go. I got one on the go right now, which I recommend you to read. Not that I'm trying to plug somebody else's book, but this book is amazing.
Super.
And this guy, it's Darren, I'm pronouncing his name right, Darren Olean. The book is called Super Life. And I'm just about finished it. And it's not your typical health book, but it's great. And what I've learned from this, I think we can both agree we've never read a book we didn't learn something from.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What I'm learning about foods and vitamins and just, it's incredible. And I'm dropping weight, but not in like, that's not the goal. It's just happening naturally because of how, like, what I'm adapting from this book. It's just incredible.
You know, I'm a personal trainer by trade, and
Wow.
I've been for over 30 years, 35 years. And one of the things I say is that if you put your health first, the weight will come off. Don't focus on the weight, just focus on your health. You do what's right for your health, and the weight will come off. It just happens that way.
I always say, Kurt, if bad food wasn't so good, this wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
I live in Las Vegas, Nevada. Even on the outskirts, you couldn't find bad food if you wanted to. So I've been going to Whole Foods quite a bit and doing that thing, and it may be a little bit more expensive, but a lot of the things that this book talks about is pay for it now or pay for it later.
Right.
And I'm adapting that. And why are we being cheap on ourselves?
Right.
And
you have the luxury. You have a gentleman out there by the name of Stan the Rhino Efferding. He's known as the world's strongest bodybuilder, and he has a diet that he came up with, and he'll tell you right off the bat. He goes, the best diet is the diet that you'll stick to. You know, just like the best exercise program is the one that you'll stick to. And he's just a brilliant guy, and he's one of the most generous, giving people you'll ever meet. And he's 50 something years old, and he's got the body of a 20-year-old bodybuilder. he's just remarkable. But it comes from living a good life and eating the proper foods. Now, this isn't to say that he never goes off and binges or things like that, but you keep those things in check because you still want to live life and enjoy life. but just be cautious of how much you enjoy life. You don't want to go binging for years and then come back and regret it.
One thing I've learned for myself anyways is I'll eat however I want, and then all of a sudden I burn out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I eat really bad, and then I start getting healthy for months, then I burn out. This is a gradual. What I really like about this book, Jesus, I'm promoting this guy's book over my own.
Over your own,
because
yeah.
I do like my book, but I think it's very conceited or ignorant to be like, oh, my book is great. I hope that people do buy my book. What's more important than this is that people can learn about getting involved in the Mandy Schwartz Foundation. This health book is just so interesting how he breaks things down and things I didn't know, like the amount of vitamins that are actually in bell peppers uncooked. I didn't know that before. So now I'll go to Whole Foods and I'll get my food, and there's sauteed like fajita mix with this bell peppers. And then I go to the cut ones that are fresh, and just little adjustments and changes. I feel really good.
Right.
Now I've been 15 pounds lighter than I am, but I didn't feel as good as I feel now.
Right. That's what healthy food will do for you. It will make you feel better. So, all right. So let's get back onto your school experience here real quick, because I want to make a point. So here you are. You're sort of like, at times, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I get the sense that you were somewhat of a smart aleck, if you will, and from time to time.
Some would say jackass, delinquent.
Yeah. So, all right. So, in fact, you threw a pudding at a girl one time. How did you not get your ass beat? I mean, honestly, like, it's because from what you're describing the school, this is an athletic school. So a great number of these guys are hockey players. Now, I never played hockey, but the hockey I watched, none of those guys are afraid of getting in a fight. They'll
actually, the thing was that I threw that pudding to get respect from these elite hockey guys.
At a girl?
Yeah, because this girl took a ball. She took like a cup of water, and I didn't put in my book exactly what she said, but she said something derogatory to the guy that she threw it on. I don't know what their beef was before. And he basically said, like, someone needs to teach her a lesson. And I was at another table, and I was like, I'll teach that lesson. Like, I jumping at the opportunity here to be noticed like an idiot. And they were like, what are you going to do? I was like, I'll throw a pudding at her. And the guy just like leaned back in his chair, and he goes, no, you're going to throw it in her face. So now I've already ponied up that I got your back. I'll do something. Like, I want your respect. Well, now I got to do something that I was like, I'll do this. Now he wants me to do this. And I just was like, fuck it, let's go. And I did. And the girls involved that I threw the pudding, the most miraculous thing out of that whole story is they defended me to the teachers. They were like, no, don't blame him. Blame these guys. Like, they put him up to it. And I'm like, oh, like, I haven't spoken to these girls in years, but like, they're saints in my eyes, because I could have got in a lot of trouble for that. But the girl that I put the pudding on was like, no, like.
So even though they didn't hold a gun to your head.
No, I couldn't believe it. I think she went on to be a doctor or something. I'm not sure, but again, we were kids. We were like 15, right. And not that matters whether works at a supermarket or what have you. I mean, she was a good person and good enough for me to. She could have burned my ass, and she didn't. Still can't believe it. I think about that story now, and I'm like, man, that's what a kind soul. What a good person to be like, hey, like, just, it's okay. It wasn't okay. I was a little fucker, man. Like, I didn't just throw this pudding on her face. It like smashed on her face. Like the exterior plastic. I threw it so hard it like shattered.
Oh, wow.
And I don't think it shattered on her face, but it like cushioned over the pudding. But like, just what I'm describing to you, like, it was like a direct hit, like right in her face.
Maybe because of the kind of person she is, maybe she felt she deserved it. Maybe she felt like what she did was over the top, and
Yeah, again, I don't know the dialogue of what happened between them, but I know that she got up and she was just like, fuck this guy, and grabbed like, I think water or chocolate milk or something, and just like dumped it in his shirt. And he couldn't do anything because there was teachers. So what is he gonna do? What's he gonna do? Like grab a pudding and throw it in her face? Like,
right.
but she knew that. And then he was like, okay, now they just saw me and I can't retaliate, but this little pipsqueak can.
Right.
And that's where I came in.
I would tell you, if it was me, I'd be like, I'm not throwing my pudding. Give me something else. I'm eating my pudding.
No, we had like these dessert carts. So when you got your food and you sat down and you ate your food, you could get up to the dessert cart. You could get up. There was Jello and pudding and creme brulee or whatever, right? And geez, like I wasn't a very big kid. I was like probably 145 pounds. Like she could have kicked my ass. Half those girls now could kick my ass. So, but it was, I think, stunned when I did it. And then I remember a teacher tried to, just from memory, this is like a long time ago. I remember like a teacher went to grab my arm and I got weaseled out of the way. And I remember when I went into like the big guy's dorm, I saw the kid that put me up to it. I put myself up to it, but anyways, he like threw me up against the wall and was like, I just knew that it meant like keep his name out of my mouth.
Right.
And I wouldn't have said it anyways, because I remember just walking down that hallway and they were like patting me on the back and high-fiving me. I was like, I've made it. Like, this is it. Like, this is the pinnacle of high school. And what a stupid thing to think at the expense of somebody else. But you don't know, I don't blame myself, beat myself up. And I hope nobody else does either for maybe things that they had done to me, because that's how you learn, unfortunately. And I learn the hard way every time, still to this day.
I like to think that I've done a better job to where it doesn't take as much for me to learn things nowadays. So I think I got a little wiser over the time, and don't need to be beat over the head as much as I used to. So hopefully that's what happens. But so all right, so that people can hear more of these interesting stories of yours that are quite, some of them are quite funny actually, and all that you went through. How can people reach you, or how can people find your book and and purchase your book? Because I'm really happy that you're donating the proceeds to this foundation, because it's an admirable foundation.
Thank you.
For what you do, or for what it does.
People can, they just Google my name. You can find my book on Amazon. There's a website, Wild Dogs. Instagram is Stosy187, STOSY 187. They can reach me from there. Yeah, it's everywhere. Barnes and Noble, Target. It's kind of hard to believe, but you just, type in the name, the name, my name, or the name of the book, and you'll find it.
Okay.
But still, it's been out since August 17th of last year. And I remember they had told me, like, hey, don't look at launch, like book launch is not like 1 week, it's like 1 year. Now I totally understand what they mean, because we're still in talks, and hopefully, I don't want to jinx it, but with somebody that I really admire to do the audiobook, which would be very cool. And I'm having such a blast doing this. And I just want anyone listening to, thanks for your time, and thanks for your time, Kurt. And I really hope that they do purchase, but if they don't, please just try to get involved in one match, and swabbing your cheek for leukemia is the most important thing.
That's a wonderful advice, and thank you. All right, so folks, listen, go out or go on Amazon, go to and find Wild Dogs: An Adventure in Adolescence, and purchase it. And it's for a good cause, and you get something out of it. You get a good read that'll probably make you laugh, and I don't know, will make them cry too, Christos?
Maybe a little bit. That would show that I'm maybe a decent writer, but just laughing, and hope to laugh and get some life lessons out of it. And maybe a kid that's about to go into high school can make some better decisions from what he's read from me.
Yeah, and if you are that kid that's going into high school, and you read about it and some of the things you should do, but don't do the things like, run alcohol through your school and stuff and figure out how to do it.
Well, now, Kurt, what kind of profit margins are we talking about?
Right.
Let's not cancel them out completely here.
Sell little Debbie's or something that's legal to, don't get yourself in too much trouble if you get caught. So
stay on the right side of the fence.
There you go. Well, Christos, thank you very much for being on the show today and sharing your story and telling us about the book and for all that your book's going to do in helping people to match up bone marrow so that it can save lives. Yeah. So thank you for that. And folks, thank you for joining us today. And as I always say, till next time, take care, be safe, and love yourself so you can love others.
Thanks for having me, Kurt.
Thank you.